Chapter 120 to 127. Universe 7. Earth. Year 761, October 21st. As everyone knows, as if it were a knowledge we are all born with, just like we know that Peter Parker became Spider-Man because he was bitten by a strange spider and the death of his Uncle Ben, or that Ash's first Pokemon was a Pikachu. We all know that this was the day that the Scion Raditz went to look for his brother, proposed, joining his association of exterminators of civilizations on planets, and since Goku refused, he kidnapped Gohan to coerce him, and since Raditz was too strong for Goku, he had to ally with Piccolo to defeat him. And thanks to a super header of an angry Gohan, who at that time multiplied his strength by 1333 when he was angry, but not later in the manga, Goku managed to grab Raditz by the back and immobilized him. "You bastard!" Raditz shouted, trying to escape Goku's perfect grip. "Piccolo, hurry! Do that move again!" Goku shouted, holding Raditz with all his strength at the same time he faced him towards Piccolo. "I thought it would come to this, so I have been preparing ahead of time. However, it will take a little more time," Piccolo said, concentrating more ki on his fingers to prepare his most emblematic attack. "Piccolo, hurry! Please, hurry up and do it!" Goku shouted, as it was becoming increasingly difficult to keep Raditz immobilized. "Let me go, Kakaroto! You fool! You're gonna end up regretting it if you keep clinging to me!" Raditz shouted, trying to convince Goku, because if you can't win with force, try to win by reasoning. "I'm gonna die together with ya," Goku said, determined to sacrifice himself to save his son and all the people of the earth. What? Why, you bastard, are you out of your mind? Let me go. I'm sorry. I'll never come back to this planet again, Red Eyes said, trying to trick Goku again, because if you can't reason, you have to lie, again. "Piccolo, hurry up and do it," Goku shouted, insisting once again. "Sorry to have kept you waiting. Are you ready for this?" said Piccolo, who was already prepared to launch his definitive energy attack. "Do it," Goku shouted with all his might. "Makenku Sappa!" Piccolo shouted, launching his attack toward Raditz and Goku. "Hoo! Pium! Puff!" Attack that pierced Raditz, with entry and exit hole, and also Goku, and both fell to the ground without the ability to move, but still alive. Damn it! Who would have thought that I'd be killed by punks like these? To think that Kakaroto would throw away his own life. Raditz said, dying on the ground. "Son Goku will be back soon. There are some nice things here on this planet called Dragon Balls. If you ask them of it, any kind of wish is possible. You can even bring the dead back to life," Piccolo said to show Raditz the reason for his brother's sacrifice, performing the biggest blunder of his life. "Well, one of them, you'll see what I mean later." "Damn you. Still, you told me something nice. Everything that's happened here so far has been relayed to my 5 comrades who are on a faraway planet. They know that I've been killed. Now they'll come here without question. You bastards are foolish. All the humans on this planet W will be swept clean in the blink of an eye," Raditz said, using the last moments of his life to bitter the lives of the 2 people who killed him. When will those 5 get here?" said Goku, who could barely speak. "In 1 year, just 1 year, hahaha. That was a short-lived celebration, wasn't it? After all, you bastards are mere worms," Raditz said with a malevolent smile when he saw the despair on Piccolo's face. "Die!" Piccolo shouted, giving him the final blow. And in that moment, Fu! In a timely manner, the flying device in which Bulma, Krillin and Mutant Rashi were traveling appeared through the skies. "Someone is on the ground," Bulma said, making a brief observation of the situation, although there were 2 people on the ground. "The one left standing is," said Krillin, who was trying to create an unwanted expectation, since we all know who has stood. "Piccolo," Mutant Rashi said, highlighting the obvious and finishing Krillin's phrase before landing. "Kami-sama Palace. This is very bad, our biggest nightmare, the one that has stalked me since we met, Broly, has come true." Kami-sama said with great fear and pain while watching the outcome of that fight, and of course the final apocalyptic message that Red Eyes relayed to Piccolo. "Goku," Mr. Popo said, observing the deplorable and on the verge of death Goku's state. "I didn't want to accept it at first. I believed that Broly's appearance and that ridiculous and useless alien would be something that wouldn't happen again. That despite living in a universe full of beings more powerful than us, none would arrive here while I was still alive," Kami said, expressing his past optimistic thoughts. However, years later Goku appeared, who like Broly also had a tail. Popo said, remembering with amazement and terror his first encounter with Goku. Yes, for a moment I had a heart attack upon seeing that there was another being like Broly in our planet, but luckily Goku was and is a boy with a very pure and kind heart, unlike him. Kami-sama said that just like Popo also remembered how Goku came into their lives and the great contrast between him and Broly, and cried. But unfortunately we were wrong. One more of Broly's race has come to Earth, and not with good, or at least with no intentions, unlike Broly, Popo said, seeing how evil and dangerous Raditz was compared to the weak Earthlings, so much that it made King Piccolo look like a little sister of charity. And that is not the worst of all. There are still 5 more like him, and as he said, there are still some much more powerful than him among them. There is no other alternative. I will have to take advantage of Goku's unfortunate death in our favor. If everything goes according to plan, it is possible that in a short time Goku will acquire the necessary power to defeat those Saiyan once he has resurrected, said Kami, who was prepared to secure Goku's body, so he can train in the other world. This. Kami-sama. I know that you are against it and that, like me, you think this can be a much worse remedy than the disease, but don't you think we should ask for help from Broly? Said Mr. Popo, whose voice and consciousness trembled at the thought of Broly and the chaos he could unleash. When he heard Popo, Kami closed his eyes tightly and thought carefully and bitterly, I don't know if it would be a good idea. We would be asking him to kill people of his own race. We don't know how he could take it, or what damage he could cause trying to save the Earth, or if he could change sides in some point. Despite how he is. I would love to have Broly's help, but what? Why do you want my help? Said Broly, who appeared unexpectedly behind Kami, giving him a very disturbing shoulder massage. Broly I shouted Popo and Kami, which fell to the ground of fright. Yes, it's me. I have noticed that you have said my name 3 times, so I assumed that something was happening. Oops, a scion owned by Frisia and another who looks like a good guy have died. That child seems to be the son of the good guy, and the green one. Kami. Have you been a father and you haven't told me? Come on. I would have been a great godfather and you know it, Broly said, also looking down the Antalya while having a warm reunion with his 2 former friends whom he had not seen in more than a decade. Although they weren't so excited. Broly, glad to see you. Achoo. But the situation is now disastrous. I would explain everything about Goku and Piccolo, but, said Kami, who was too stressed and terrified by the consequences of what was happening. The last thing he wanted to think about was a funny Broly joining the equation. Ha 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 ha, don't worry Kami, I have already understood the situation, and yes. I will help this time, just as I promised, Broly said, trying to reassure Kami and Popo. Really? Said Kami and Popo, who had recently regained hope. Yes, but I will do it my way. Do what you wanted to do with Goku, I'll go downstairs to chat, Broly said, disappearing once more in the same way he appeared. And those last words and disappearance of Broly made bitter the little tranquility that Broly had endeavored to convey, in his own way. I don't have a good feeling about this. Goku. 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 Krillin shouted again and again as he shook the lifeless body of his best friend, who had dedicated his last words to him before he died. Son Krillin, please don't die. Said Bulma, who was holding Goha and couldn't help crying when she saw what had happened to her best friend. Goku. Goku. Krillin continued screaming until Goku's body disappeared completely. He disappeared. Mutant Roshi said, highlighting the obvious. I see, the work of Kami. He is about the only one who would be able to do such thing. That Batad must be plotting some nonsense again, said Piccolo, who moved Catch to his heavy coat and hat to get dressed again. And before Krillin could ask his question. You are right, nice little green man. Grandpa Kami plans to make Goku train with one of the Kais in the other world, that's why he needed his body, is a bureaucracy of the other world that will allow him to train, said a serious, imposing, masculine and sensual unknown voice that came from behind. What? They all shouted when they heard those disturbing and unexpected words of an unknown voice as they turned in a forced and exaggerated way to see what the origin of that voice was. And when he turned around and saw the origin of that voice, the most absolute terror seized them. Since that voice came from an attractive and virile man, very tall and muscular, with black hair, and also had a third eye on his forehead. However, that strange detail went unnoticed by Bulma, Krillin, Mutant Roshi, and Piccolo, since they couldn't get his eyes away of the great and long ape tail of that man, which, as if it were a mutant snake, a mutant and fluffy snake that was holding Raditz' body around from his neck and lifting it up in the air as if it were hand luggage. "Oh. Tail, that tail, has a tail," said Bulma, who hugged the unconscious Gohan tightly as she backed away when she saw that this mysterious man belonged to the same race as Raditz. "No, it can't be, another scion here," said Krillin, who was also retreating just like Bulma, but unlike her, he was preparing to fight in case there was no other alternative. "This is not good," Mutant Roshi said, that unlike Krillin, he didn't back down. He knew it would be impossible to run away from that alien. Impossible. That garbage had said that his companions would take a year to arrive. What is one of them doing here? Piccolo shouted with despair and anguish while his green body lacking an arm gave off cold sweat in a way he had never done before. Raditz before he died told them that among his companions there were some who were as strong as him and others who were much more powerful than him, and although he also told an apparent lie about the time it would take to arrive to planet Earth since one of them was here. Piccolo didn't believe for a moment that Raditz had lied to him about the power level of the other scion. At least it wasn't a lie with the one in front of him. He didn't know what it was or how to explain it, but he clearly sensed that the muscular scion in front of him was very, very superior to Raditz. And that scion, Broly, focused his eyes on one of the four and slowly approached them while his tail remained exactly in the same place holding Raditz's body, but it grew as if it were an enlargement to continue walking. He won. Krillin stammered as his whole body trembled when he saw that the scion was heading straight for him, but quickly realized that it wasn't like that, since it passed by, and instead an Bulma. Gohan. The terrifying and strange scion stood in front of the terrified Bulma, which was totally paralyzed and about to cry for the fear of seeing that the scion bent down a little to be at her height and kept staring at her. What do he want from me? Bulma thought as she grabbed Gohan stronger than ever. The terrifying and strange scion stood in front of the terrified Bulma, which was totally paralyzed and about to cry due to the fear of seeing that a monster more threatening than the previous one bent down a little to be at her height and did not stop staring at her. What does he want from me? Bulma thought as he grabbed Gohan stronger than before. This was being a very chaotic, strange and terrifying situation. That scion kept looking at Bulma with his three eyes from side to side, from top to bottom as if she were some artistic sculpture, trying to find some kind of information he considered necessary. The situation was being so strange and tense that no one could act or even think normally. That scion hasn't stopped looking at Bulma, and maybe his chest, just like me. I'm glad to see that there are perverted scions in the universe. I was beginning to believe they had some kind of defect for these important things. Except old Rashi, who always had the ability to think about perverted things, no matter how dangerous or tense the situation is. There was only an awkward and threatening silence until... Quick! What are you waiting for? Hold the tail. It's his weak point. Piccolo shouted at Krillin, who was the closest to Broly in his long, easy-to-grasp tail. This guy surely has a monstrous strength and powers, but his tail should remain his weak point, Piccolo thought, since he didn't want to give up. Yes, it's true. Krillin shouted as he stepped out of the trance he was in and realized he had the opponent's weak point near him. I have to grab it tightly, but without tearing it away. If I rip it off despite the pain and weaken him a bit, he will lose his weak point, Krillin thought as he pounced towards the tail. Kath. And he managed to grab it. Good. Piccolo and Mutant Roshi thought, which began to load ki to perform their most destructive skills. Piccolo the Menken Pusappa, with which he killed Raditz and Goku, and Mutant Roshi his classic steroid Kamehame. But something disturbed the three during that process. Aish. No, it can be, he has to be pretending. Krillin said with despair and disbelief when he saw that as much as he stretched the tail. Broly didn't even flinch, as if he wasn't affected at all. Don't stop Krillin, he still doesn't move, Mutant Roshi thought as he continued to loading ki. This has to work. If it doesn't work, we're done. Grab it with everything you can, don't fall in his absurd bluff or I'll kill you, said Piccolo, who didn't want to believe Broly was immune to the attacks in the tail. No. Bulma stammered, who fell to the ground in absolute panic when he saw that he was practically in the middle of the crossfire between Piccolo, Mutant Roshi, and in front of a huge man belonging to a race of sadistic and heartless planetary killers. Catastrophic situation, until... Are you by chance Bulma? Are you Tai's little sister? Broly said with a smile on his face as he offended his hand to Bulma so she could get up. And with that comment the situation changed radically. Do you know my sister? said Bulma, who was no longer as terrified as before. Now she was incredibly confused, and relieved by Broly's attitude, which wasn't hostile like Raditz. You have a sister? Krillin shouted in surprise, since after more than a decade of being friendly friends, Bulma had never mentioned that, and Mutant Roshi too, but imagining an extremely attractive and stunning tights wearing a very provocative swimsuit. So, this is not an enemy? Piccolo said, who was more confused than anyone, but still continued loading his key attack for precaution. Ha 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 ha. Of course I know her. In fact, she is the first human I met when I arrived on this planet. We even went on vacation through Space One, and Jocko was there too. Aw. I can't believe she didn't tell you about me. This tights. Broly said, materializing in his hand a photo album on the holiday they had at the end of Volume 3. Photos where the transformed Broly and Ties bathing in the spaceship pool could be seen, and Jocko with face of suffering. One moment, it's true. My sister told me that she had an extraterrestrial friend who, unlike Jocko, wasn't useless and a loser. Are you Broly? Bulma asked, who went from panic to confusion and from confusion to joy when he saw that the supposed planetary threat before him was actually a friend of his sister, one with a very good reputation that of course would do nothing wrong to her friend's sister or her planet. Yes, the same, I'm Broly. Ha 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 ha. Sorry for scare you, but when I saw you I had the impression that you looked a lot like her and I wanted to be sure that you were her famous sister before saying anything, said Broly, who offered Bulma his hand again so she could get up. And Bulma, who on this occasion was already mentally stable, accepted Broly's help at the same time she asked him a question to answer a question in the previous sentence, famous sister. Why do you say so? And Broly while helping her to get up. Ha ha ha. Tights has always been telling me about his beautiful, kind, funny, brave and super intelligent sister. Tights wanted to introduce us, but because of my circumstances it has been impossible for me to be here in recent years. But I'm glad we finally met Bulma-san, Broly said, holding Bulma by the hand in a cool attitude a few inches from her face at the right moment she got to her feet with his help. And because of those flattering words, Broly's good reputation that her sister had given her on some occasions, the adrenaline she had on her body due to the situation, the confident, sturdy, charismatic and magnetic attitude of the alpha male he gave off with every word and gesture, the firm but gentle grip he had used to lift he and his beautiful but masculine features that he sculpted in his body when he remodeled himself. This mortal combination made Bulma blush like a teenager when she saw that her favorite fashion singer was smiling at her in a concert. This guy is not bad, outside the tail and the third eye, which on the other hand give a mysterious and original air. He's fucking handsome. Tall, dark and handsome, exactly my kind of man. What am I thinking at? No, it's not the time for this. And on the other hand. Bingo, Broly thought as he mentally rubbed his hands in a perverse way. Desire Realm. Broly Planet, Broly Land, Broly City, and inside of Broly Mansion. Broly and friends were still in the movie theater enjoying the adventures of Broly. Until Broly himself began broadcasting the director's comments. Ha 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 ha. As I planned from the beginning. Appear in that moment of fear, despair and tension and indirectly go from being a danger to a kind of savior due to a misunderstanding of her, which will make her even feel a little guilty towards me. The fact that she had in advance very good reviews of me from someone as close to her as her sister, especially in comparison to Jocko, which has served as an excuse and alibi to flatter her without appearing forced or slimy. The mystery that she has been creating around me in her mind during all these years, which has been unleashed at a moment as crucial as this. Adding also that now Bulma is completely disgusted with Yamcha for how incredibly idiotic, irresponsible, immature, pathetic, and unfaithful she is. The first valid impression after the scare, which will make me look like a bad boy but I'm really a good person, thus recreating the impression Vegeta gave her in the original franchise but in a much better way, which is that I am exactly her type of man, as she declared in an episode of Dragon Ball. Along with my impeccable appearance, magnetic and virile charisma, and the non-expressive language and actions that I have researched and practiced so much, have successfully completed the first stage of my waifu mission. Wawawawahawa. I'm a fucking genius. Broly said, rubbing his hands in a perverse way while admiring himself, as usual. What? They all shouted upon see and hear what Broly had said and done both outside and inside the screen. One moment. Waifu? Your waifu is Bulma. Is she your goal of conquest? Kamagawa said, very surprised, not expecting that development. I admit she's pretty, but... Najimi said, feeling a little upset to see that Broly preferred a normal pretty human over an almost perfect goddess like her, although she was relieved too. The female mind is very complex. One moment Broly, are you saying that from decades ago you have been interested in that girl and that despite this, until now you hadn't contacted her even once? But why? Aren't you supposed to be a determined alpha male? Asked the romantic and friend-zoned Obito, who sensed he was about to discover a new facet of his boss, but he wasn't sure yet if he would find it acceptable or not. Elementary Dear Obito and Kamigawa. In fact, one of the reasons I chose the Dragon Ball universe was precisely for this. Why didn't I start with her from the first moment? Well, the main reason was because I shouldn't alter the reason why Bulma created the Dragon Ball radar and began his search where she would find Goku, and from there the story would begin. If she had known me, it was only a matter of time she had fallen in love with me, so I wouldn't need to ask Shinran for a perfect boyfriend. She would have the perfect one from the beginning. And I didn't want her to know me with the appearance of a small child, especially when the Scions have a very long childhood. First impressions are important. In addition, statistically childhood or youth relationships don't survive maturity. And I didn't want to go out with an immature little girl. I'm not a lolicon, Broly said, explaining to Obito the reasons for his decisions as if he were an analyst. So all the time you spent with her sister and Jaco was to make her subliminally become interested in you through her older sister adventures and comments? Asked Aizen, who was smelling a long-term evil plan in the environment. Ha 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 ha, sharp as always Aizen. You're right, that was the main reason for the holidays with Tights and Jaco, since I needed another person so that by showing those photos didn't look like we were on a date. Although I also enjoyed his company and it helped me improve my social skills. Broly said, taking another sip of his mellow cola. And Rin, who was still amazed to see how perverse and calculating Broly's mind was, commented on one of the many moral dilemmas she saw in her plan. Wait. Are you aware that this Bulma now has a boyfriend, and yet you will go after her? And in the future she would marry Vegeta, with whom she would have a son and a daughter, Kamigawa said, adding more wood to the fire. Of course. In fact, now is the best moment of all. Yamcha has been unfaithful to her recently, therefore she will now be spiteful and will want to take revenge in the same way. Besides, it's only a matter of time that they break. As for Vegeta, fuck him. I arrived earlier in this timeline. Ha 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 ha. Broly said with a malevolent and corrupt smile as he admired his future wife on screen. Fucking sociopath. Meow. Shouted outraged all those who still had a certain morality and cared what Broly had done, such as Rin, Frozy, Ichiryu, Hagoromo, and Mantamune, of course. Leaving the unnecessary moral considerations aside. Why her? I admit she's pretty, but... were there not many other women with better bodies in the world of To Love Ru? Dio asked, who had very high standards when it comes to women, to get pregnant or devour them. He is a guy with many facets. Ah, it shows that you weren't guys from the 80s and / or 90s of my world. You will see, at least in my country during that time, without internet and at the hours when a child could watch TV. There were few programs where you could see minimally attractive and interesting female characters with whom to empathize in an interesting story. And of those few, Bulma of Dragon Ball was the best. Not only did she introduce us to some perverted scenes, which were censored in many countries, quite fun and spicy, that unlike the current ones weren't forced to the extreme, also managed to arouse the first sexual curiosities in some prepubescent boys like me, since it was a time of excessively prudish and lack of information about these things. She was also one of the few important female characters with an interesting and decisive personality, one that felt real and independent despite not being a fighter, unlike most of the actual female characters in the manga/anime shonen, which are only complements of the protagonist and have the personality of a potato. She is beautiful, extremely intelligent, brave, funny, good person, generous, loyal, Yamcha doesn't count, good mother and wife, the richest woman on the planet, unlike Milk is not a pimple in the ass with her husband, has a strong and determined personality, which I loved when I was human, and now that I am Saiyan I like it 100 times more. Fuck. She is by far the most important and decisive character in Dragon Ball. Without her the history wouldn't have moved. If it wasn't because she went to look for the Dragon Ball, Goku would never have left her mountain to become strong. That's why the world would have been raised by Piccolo Sr., Pilaf or the Red Ribbon. Later all the humans would have been massacred, Raditz and the others, and if we ignore the one that Raditz had killed all the humans, in the event that Dr. Gero had survived and invented killer androids, and no one could have stopped them since she wouldn't invented the time machine. And without Bulma Dragon Ball Super wouldn't have existed either, since without he Beerus and Whis wouldn't have been marveled by the food of the earth, food they tasted for the first time on Bulma's birthday, and that later she was supplying them to gain their help and friendship, there would be no Super Saiyan God nor the training that was gave to Goku and Vegeta. Neither would they have found the Super Dragon Ball for the Beerus and Kampa tournament, nor could they have stopped Zamasu without his time machine. And if none of this had happened, Xeno would have destroyed most universes, including Universe 7. Fuck. It is or is not an incredible woman, said Broly, who reinforced his argument through PowerPoints and various videos, which he had prepared for a moment like this. And after a few seconds of awkward silence in which everyone tried to assimilate all that information and its multiple interpretations and conclusions. Okay. We have understood. You want to fulfill your childhood dream of marrying your first love, which was an 80s cartoon. Okay. We have understood that you are an almost omnipotent and immortal god, but still you want to pursue a sickly romance with a normal human despite not needing to reproduce. Okay. We got it, Najimi said, quite disappointed with Broly, saying okay many times to prove it. By the way, Najimi, you shouldn't talk either, you don't need to eat to survive and you've already eaten 3 packages of BB corn. Broly said, pointing out Najimi's hypocrisy, sighing he was a little angry by the criticism. Don't criticize another's waifu. Dragon Ball. Universe 7. Earth. Yes, it's nice to have met you too, Broly-san. By the way, what exactly did my sister tell you about me? Said Bulma, who was very red and tried to look away from Broly so as not to be more, but still asking things that would surely make her even more red. And before Broly could answer it in a previously rehearsed way to earn even more points. Can I know what is happening? I don't understand anything. Shouted Piccolo, who was very irritated with the current situation and wanted answers as soon as possible. That broke the romantic atmosphere that Broly struggled to build, but he didn't care much, since being serious and explaining the situation was also something that would help improve his image in Bulma's eyes. Hee. I'm sorry, I got a little nostalgic and sentimental to see a familiar face. Yes, of course, I will solve your doubts, but before that, could you stop grabbing my tail? I understand that it is soft and striking, but we have to respect our vital space, little bald, although everyone here is bald except Bulma and Gohan, Broly said, looking at Krillin, who still held his tail tightly without realizing it. And Krillin it being alluded since he was the only bald of the 3 who was holding a tie. He let it go while apologizing, this. I'm sorry. Apologies accepted, little one, Broly said, not giving importance to the misunderstanding. Who are you? Are you one of those scions that Raditz talked about before I killed him? What relationship do you have with Cammy? And what are your intentions? Said Piccolo, who tried to be effective and efficient when collecting information, and also realized that Broly said something about Cammy, as if he knew him well and were friends. You have a lot of questions, Green Man. My name is Broly, and yes, I am a scion, although I have nothing to do with that scum that dirties the name of my race or the other 5 that are less than a year from here. My relationship with Cammy, let's say that when I came to this planet when I was little, he taught me many things like martial arts and magic. I saved him on one occasion and swiped a lot of jokes thanks to him, ha 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 ha. You could say that we are good friends. As for my intentions, it is a very broad matter. But if you mean what to do with the science issue or if I think of hurting you, the answer is that I am on your side. You can rest easy, Broly said to reassure Piccolo and company, which unlike Bulma still had some doubts about Broly. What a relief, said Krillin, who felt that a great weight was taken off him upon knowing that not only Broly wouldn't kill them, but they also had a new ally. Yes, it is a relief to know that we have the help of someone else. But, if nobody is going to ask, I will. Why do you have a third eye, Anne? What the hell is wrong with your tail? Said Master Mutant Rashi, who put on his uniform again while he was glad to live another day. That. Let's say I'm a pretty special scion. Occasionally there are random mutations in each race that improve their genes, and this is my case. That's why I have a third eye that gives me strange powers and a most useful and powerful tail without factory defects, Broly said, clarifying the doubts about his most striking physical characteristics. And after clearing that doubt, Krillin walked away from the group without taking his eyes off Broly's tail, who was still holding Raditz's body, and went to look for Gohan's hat with the 4-star ball. Either way, we gotta hurry and collect the other 6 balls and bring Goku back to life. I wouldn't do that. Right now Cammy must be leading Goku to the other world to train with him, the North Kai, a good colleague of mine. He will train him well. Goku himself will tell you when you need to resurrect him to fight against those subjects. I guess Cammy or Baba will inform you in a few hours, Broly said while inspecting Raditz's body. Broly. I have a question, How did that guy know where we were, just like that? Asked Bulma, who asked useful questions to prepare for the threat of the next seance that would come and be able to hide without being detected. He was wearing a strange device on his face. It seems like that it can tell an opponent's strength and location, Piccolo replied instead of Broly. Yes, it serves exactly for that, and as a tool for communication and labor control. I have already turned off these last functions so that they're friends so they can't hear what we are saying, Broly said as he handed the device to Bulma, which left Gohan to Mutant Roshi to learn about its functions. This an incredible machine. It's a bit broken, but it looks like I can do something with it. Bulma said with a big smile when she saw that it wasn't very complicated and that would have many uses. Man, you're amazing, Bulma-san, said Krillin, very astonished to see the ease with which Bulma had understood the operation of that sophisticated machine. I see that it wasn't an exaggeration, you're really a genius, Broly said to positively reinforce Bulma. Oh, thanks Broly, said Bulma, who for some strange reason completely ignored what Krillin had said. If I bring this back with me, study it and re-engineer it, then maybe we can find Yamcha, Tenshinhan and the others with it. Don't worry about that, if you want, I can give you a more sophisticated and better versions that I have created. Those are very defective, you'll see what I mean when you investigate it. I also leave the blueprints in case you want to make your own version, if you have any questions, although I know you won't have it, you just have to ask me, Broly said, making 3 more trackers and a USB appear in his hand, which he gave them to Bulma while everyone except Piccolo watched with great surprise as Broly had strange abilities to create or make appear things out of nowhere. Many, thanks Broly-san. Oh god. Not only is he handsome, nice, mysterious and strong, he is also intelligent, said and thought Bulma, who had been dazzled even more by Broly when she saw that he understood about technology, a common taste she valued. Well, either way, let's head back to the Kame house for now, said Mutant Roshi, who wanted to return home as a regular old man. You are right. I can't get anything done here. Broly, will you join us? Said Bulma, who wanted to be with her friends in that delicate situation, but she also didn't want to lose Broly from sight. Of course, Broly said to Bulma while he was making Raditz disappear from everyone's sight and returning his tail to normal, things that surprised everyone, but nobody wanted to ask questions about that, there were other things to do and say. Then I will postpone the Dragon Ball search for later. Said Krillin, who stared at Broly's tail without daring to blink in case he did something spectacular again. Piccolo, what are you going to do? Mutant Roshi asked, who was surprised to see that Piccolo had his arm back, which he regenerated while everyone was talking. Me? Train to kill those bastards. I don't know how strong you will be compared to them, Broly, but I still don't trust you. That's why I'll be tanking Son Goku's child with me, Piccolo said, looking at Broly with hostility. What are you planning to do? Said Bulma, who for obvious reasons thought that being with Piccolo wasn't very good for Gohan. That kid, Gohan, should be capable of gaining incredible fighting power if he were to be trained, and we need that power to fight those Scions that will arrive in 1 year. I don't like the idea of training his son, but we have few viable alternatives, Piccolo said, being extremely rational, since he still didn't trust Broly. And before Krillin, Bulma and Mutant Roshi could express their more than logical complaints. You are absolutely right, this little one has enormous potential. Potential only inferior to that of a legendary Super Saiyan, talent which must be polished by an expert teacher. Which is why I will train him with pleasure, Broly said that without anyone noticing. He held Gohan and began to heal him with his magic but preventing him from waking up. What? Train him? Everyone exulted upon hearing that sentence. What do you mean by training him, Broly-san? Asked Bulma, who was very surprised that suddenly Broly, who had just appeared, decided to train Gohan, a boy who had just met who was only 5 years old. It was strange. And Piccolo obviously got very angry at what Broly said, since he felt like a little boy who had just announced that he wanted a specific toy. And then a bigger bastard boy caught it before him. You're kidding, right? You just appeared here from nowhere and you think that with a few words I will believe and trust what you say. That child can be our best weapon against the Scions. And you want me to give him to the most suspicious Scion? That child is going to. But Broly interrupted him quite unexpectedly. And I will also train you, Piccolo. No matter how mature you look, you are only 4 years older than little Gohan, so you are still a little green. Ha 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 ha, green. Do you get it? Anyway, you come with me. And of course, everyone overreacted. And Piccolo burst into a rage. You are laughing at me. I will. Which didn't last long, since one Broly appeared behind his back and grabbed his shoulder while the other was in front of him still holding Gohan. What the hell? They all shouted once again in an exaggerated way upon see that there were 2 Brolys and that one of them appeared behind Piccolo without anyone noticing. Does he also have multiplication skills? But when he got behind me, I can't move, Piccolo thought, that once again could see the big difference between them. See you later, said the Broly behind Piccolo before disappearing completely with Piccolo, and at the same time so did Gohan, who was in the arms of the other Broly. And seeing that Piccolo, Gohan and one of the Brolys disappeared magically once again, Bulma, Krillin and Mutant Rashi overreacted as usual in an anime way. What did you just do? Bulma asked, that despite having seen so many strange things since she began his adventures with Goku, this paranormal fact clouded her scientific mind. Impressive, I had heard about this skill, but it is the first time that I see such an advanced teleportation capability. You used this same ability to make the photo album, those alien things and the body of Goku's brother appear and disappear. Am I right? Asked Mutant Rashi, showing off his great knowledge acquired throughout his extensive life full of other magical and paranormal situations. And that multiplication of bodies, it looks like Ten's skill. Said Krillin, who was determined to find a relation between Ten Shinhan and Broly due to his third eye. You are right, Master Rashi and Krillin, as I said before. I am a very special scion. I have sent them to a place where they will train in the best possible conditions. Don't worry, they are in good hands, Broly said, rubbing bald spots to Krillin and Rashi as if they were lifelong friends. One moment, Broly, why do you have to train Gohan? He is a very small child. Bulma said, appealing to reason and his maternal instinct. I know it may sound cruel and hard to accept, Bulma. But as circumstances stand, Gohan cannot remain a helpless, cowardly, and ignorant child considering the threats and dangers around him. You have already seen what has happened because of it. He needs to be able to defend himself minimally. Even if it's simply to give his elders time to save him and themselves when the time comes. Especially when those scions have heard of the Dragon Balls because of Piccolo's oversight, Broly said, who was appealing to Gohan's safety and that of others as well so that they could accept extreme measures that they wouldn't accept in other conditions, as almost all governments do, but with bad intentions, not like Broly. The Dragon Balls. They all shouted when they understood that the information leaked due to the Raditz communicator. Maybe you're right, but still. Bulma said that despite not liking too much, he accepted Broly's arguments, especially after having lived the experience in which using Gohan Raditz blackmailed Goku to kill thousands of people, arguments that appeal to emotions and to guarantee more security in exchange of freedom, a tactic widely used by all governments, but with bad intentions, not like Broly. But Mutant Rashi was able to think with his head and not with his heart, so he sensibly said, anyway, we have to ask Chi-Chi's permission, and I must warn you that she has become very strict. I doubt she will allow Gohan to train to fight dangerous aliens. But Broly anticipated, don't worry about it, I'll take care of convincing her, although I will need some time to prepare the ideal scenario for her to accept willingly. And perplexed by the confidence with which Broly spoke, but still with doubts about his actions and plans, Krillin asked, okay. But then why did you take Piccolo too? I don't know if you'll know, but he's a pretty bad guy who wanted to conquer this planet and kill us all. In fact, he killed me and Mutant Rashi. Do you really want to train someone like him? Come on, Krillin, it wasn't he was, his father, or something. And it is not so bad, if so Raditz's soul couldn't have gone to the other world and from there to hell. On the other hand, of all of you it is the one that has the greatest chance of attaining greater power in the stipulated time, and above all I cannot allow him to die, since if that happened my old friend Cammy would also die, and I still have many jokes that I haven't done to him. So it is of general interest to increase their combat and survival capabilities. Broly said, explaining his motives, this time in a rational way, with which he also tried to appeal to the survival and usefulness that Piccolo had for all, except for Piccolo. It's true, if Piccolo dies Cammy too, said Krillin, who was remembering something quite important. And if Cammy dies we can't use the Dragon Balls to resurrect Goku and those who could die against the Scion. Bulma said, who could see that Broly was also a good strategist, plus 1 point for Broly. Well, since it is all clear, let's go back to the Kame house, there we can talk about everything more comfortably, Mutant Rashi said as everyone nodded and entered the flying vehicle in which they tried to make room to fit the Broly's huge body. Desire Realm. Once again in that movie theater. Broly, are you really going to train those two for those reasons? Asked Kamagawa, who obviously enjoyed reading and watching shonen content. He. Of course not. Broly said with a mischievous smile while eating popcorn and drinking cola. Form Realm. In the vast and white dimension without time where many research, training centers, and the great universal Broly spirits resided, a little boy with a monkey's tail woke up little by little, and quite confused and scared to see that he was in a totally unknown place, especially after he lived few hours ago. Where I am? Where is my dad? And what happened to that bad uncle? Gohan said, looking back and forth trying to remember what had happened and how he had reached that comfortable couch in such a strange place. Hi little one, have you slept well? Said Broly, who was on another couch in front of him while reading a book and eating some selfless snacks. And after a few seconds in which Gohan examined Broly with curiosity, he realized a small detail. Ah, you have a tail just like that bad man. Dad. Dad. Help me. I'm afraid. Bua. Gohan yelled and cried like a little boy, which is what he was. I doubt that a bad man could heal you, brought you while you were sleeping to a quiet and comfortable place and offered you free drinks and sweets. Well, there are some bad guys who would do that, especially to a small child. But I am not one of them. In addition, you also have a tail and your father also had one when he was younger. Does that make you bad guys too? Whatever, don't cry, I'm a friend of your father's teacher, Broly said, closing the book and ordering the robot maid to bring some Toriko world quality sweets and drinks, which she put in front of Gohan, who slowly stopped crying. Do you know my father? Where is he? Gohan asked, still afraid, and without eating anything on the table despite wishing it because of the manners his mother taught him. I see you don't remember very well what happened. Don't worry, I will clarify. In the meantime, eat something that I have prepared for you. I guarantee you haven't tried something like it in your life. Come on, I know you're hungry. Broly said, giving Gohan permission to eat the dishes that transcend his universe with the goal of win his trust and mentally prepare him for what he was about to see. Since next to them a large screen appeared, a giant screen where you could see the battle that Goku and Piccolo had with Raditz. And when he saw the battle, Gohan, who until now felt that was in heaven by the magnificent taste of those sweets, quickly felt sunk in the deepest hell when he saw how his father sacrificed himself to kill the man who kidnapped him. And as he saw those images he was able to remember what happened, so he didn't hesitate even in a moment that what he was seeing was true. And with every second he saw those tragic images, Gohan was able to remember in greater detail what happened, so he didn't doubt at any second that this nightmare was very real. My father is D. Gohan said, almost drowning in anguish and despair. That's right, Gohan, your father is dead, but don't worry, it is very easy for me and his friends to resurrect him. In fact, we could do it right now. However, he has chosen to do something else, something he couldn't do in life, Broly said, snapping his fingers. And with that snap the screen projected Goku from the other world, which ran in the snake way to the planet of North Kai. Dad! Gohan shouted with joy to see that his father was fine. Something that Broly did in order to make him recover the hope and happiness after the initial shock he brought with the other video. This place is the other world, and what your father is doing is training even there. Do you know why? Broly asked Gohan to make him interact, think and feel he was heard. No. I don't know, sir. Gohan said, who was for first time really attentive and participative with the conversation. He is training instead of being with you because in less than a year 5 people worse and more dangerous than the one who kidnapped you and caused your father's death will come to Earth to kill everyone, and obviously wants to avoid it. He and all his friends, to be more precise, who are already training or are about to do it. They do it despite knowing that they have almost no chances of defeating them, since they couldn't with one of the weakest between Goku and Piccolo, who are the strongest. Therefore, Gohan, you will also train to defeat them and defend the Earth, Broly said, showing images of all Goku's friends, showing how worried they were about the situation and what they were doing to solve it. Me? Fight? It can't be. I don't know how to fight, Gohan said with fear and doubts, like any normal child in this situation. Oh, you don't know how to fight? If you tell the truth, then what is this? Broly said, showing how Gohan left the spaceship and almost killed Raditz with a headbutt. And when he saw those images, Gohan could only say, I have done that? It is impossible. I don't remember. He was very shocked and confused to see how he had done all that. I know, it seems that you aren't able to use your full potential if the situation is not too precarious, even though at that time you are even stronger than your father and Piccolo together. But don't worry, with my help you will become hundreds of times more powerful in a very short time and you will learn to control part of your hidden abilities to become a guardian warrior, Broly said as he showed to Gohan on other screens again and again his superhuman feats, even the ones he done when he was younger. But I don't want to be a martial artist. I want to become an important scientist, said Gohan, giving the normal and rational reasons that every 5-year-old boy could say to not fight, reasons that wasn't indoctrinated by his mother, sarcasm. One thing doesn't take away the other, look at me, I am a great scientist and also a martial artist. Who do you think has built the robot that has given you food and is cleaning? If you want to be a scientist, don't worry, I will also teach you. Although you will have to survive the villains that will come or you can never be one. Since you will die, said Broly, who had left the little Gohan without logical excuses. But I'm scared. Gohan said, shrinking because of the great responsibility, pressure and danger he was and will being exposed. Of course you are afraid. Your father is also afraid like all his friends, however they don't cower, cry and try to flee from reality, except Yajirobe. They face it, because they aren't cowards, they train to face that fear. Or what do you expect to do? To continue being a weak and a crying baby incapable of defending himself or doing anything? You want that within a year the bad guys will kidnap you again, blackmail your father and kill him again? To remain a useless burden that cries in a corner while others try to save him and do something useful? Is that what you aspire to? Do you intend to let those bad men kill your mother, father and grandfather without doing anything? Do nothing despite being able to save everyone, because you have fear? Broly said, manipulating Gohan mentally and emotionally to do exactly what he should do, but with greater motivation than in the original work and in principle by his own decision. Children's are so easy to provoke, Broly thought, satisfied that the first step of his manipulation worked as expected. No. No. I don't want to be a coward. No one will kill mom, grandpa or dad. Gohan shouted with his pride very injured, since due to Broly's words he felt guilty about Goku's death and understood that he had to change to protect his family and himself like his father was doing, although he was still afraid. Great. That's what I wanted to hear. You have chosen well. As of today, I am your teacher. You can call me Broly-sensei. I will take care of making you a great warrior, scientist, and maybe a chef too, said Broly, who achieved his goal through methods that would shake children's psychologists with rage and enthusiasm at social engineers. Perfect. Gohan is one of my favorite characters in the entire show because of its evolution. Nevertheless, they destroyed his character completely in the Majin Buu saga, and let's not talk about what happened in Super. I will not allow something like this to happen. I will fulfill Toriyama's wet dream that his editors didn't allow him, because Goku was too popular. I'll make Gohan the protagonist of Dragon Ball Z. Well, after Broly thought with the image of Akira Toriyama in mind, which gave his permission and blessing to continue with this project. Okay, Broly-sensei. Gohan said, bowing respectfully to his new teacher. Desire Realm. In an isolated location of the Broly planet. Broly also sat on another comfortable sofa eating grapes when Piccolo suddenly appeared in front of him. What has? Piccolo said upon perceiving how all his surroundings had changed and that there was another Broly in front of him in an excessively arrogant attitude. Hi Piccolo, long time no see. Broly said, greeting Piccolo as he continued to eat without worry. You, what the hell are you? Piccolo asked, who after seeing all this he understood that Broly was an existence that was above what he knew, especially when a strange force forced him to sit on the sofa and was unable to stand up for more effort he put. Me? I'm just a normal person who wants to help save the inhabitants of this planet from extinction. Broly said with excessive humility, false humility, which made him excessively irritating. And upon seeing Broly's annoying evasive, Piccolo decided to change the subject so he could get something clear. Where is Goku's son? Gohan has accepted me as his teacher and is already training hard. Don't worry, you will join him in training when you are at similar levels, it will depend on your potential when that moment will be possible. Meanwhile I will take care of you. There is little time and there is much to do, I don't think you have time to train someone to fight an enemy with whom you don't even have possibilities today. And I can't let you die or else Kami will die too, and that will make me very sad, said Broly, showing images of Gohan running away for his life while being chased by random giant beasts. I still don't trust you. Piccolo said, who still didn't trust or agree with Broly, but his great intelligence made him realize that he didn't have many other options than to comply with what Broly said. Also, there were chances that this would be good to increase his power in view of Broly's capabilities. In addition, Broly was also right when said that he had no time to train Gohan. But he still didn't feel comfortable with it. I hope Piccolo changes his attitude soon. I have to achieve that he could interact with Gohan to soften his icy heart, or he will remain a pimple in the ass for the rest of his long life. Broly thought, who couldn't identify that grumpy green with the endearing character we all respected and wanted in Dragon Ball, possibly the best father figure in this manga. You don't need to trust me, just focus on improving as a warrior, wizard, strategist, and person. With my help you will be the first Super Namekian in modern history, said Broly, giving himself an important aura, as if he were a stylist in a program of radical change in a difficult but motivating case. A super what? Piccolo said, who didn't understand anything, since he still didn't know his extraterrestrial origin. Devastated planet of Universe 7. That damn Raditz got himself killed, said Nappa, who like in the original work, was still Vegeta's secretary. What a pathetic guy he was. To think that he'd get himself killed by guys with battle powers of 1000-inch, Vegeta said as he devoured part of the corpse of an insectoid alien that he scorched with his ki. Raditz has lost against such pathetic adversaries. It's so pathetic, without a doubt, the weakest and stupidest of the six, said Scallion, a medium-sized scion with standard muscular scion complexion, a fairly flat and forgettable face, and a hairstyle that even seemed normal for a scion, in short, the appearance of a filler scion. The weakest of the six. If I remember correctly, the number of duels between you was 46 to 44 in favor of Raditz. Shouldn't you be the weakest? As for the idiot, I wouldn't know how to differentiate, you both seem equally stupid. Ha 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 ha. Said Ginger, a scion woman with a youthful appearance, short stature, moderate chest, a small but bouncing ass, short hair with pigtails, a pretty face, very tomboy and with the smile of an authentic bastard, could makes anyone turn crazy. Shut up. And you are wrong, I have won 46 times and he only 44, of which most were when I was younger. He was 2 years older than me, obviously he had an advantage. And don't think you're the big deal just because your combat level is 800 points higher than me, you still lost 5 times against me, said Scallion, who always had to argue, make excuses and complain about everything. He has. As always you make excuses. In addition, my combat level is almost 1000 higher than yours, you always round at your convenience, and the 5 times I lost was when you fought both against me, and you are older than me. Hub. Now I don't know who was the weakest of the two, but the stupidest one has become very clear, Ginger replied once again with his poisonous tongue and insufferable attitude of a spoiled juvenile delinquent. And Ginger continued to provoke him even more, come, unquestionably weaker and idiot of the group, she said, inviting him to attack. Ch. Vegeta snorted, which was getting tired of so much noise and nonsense. Silence. Behave like true warriors once. You are the shame of the Scion race. If you don't start to behave, I will be the one who will count how many times I bury your head in the ground, shouted Yam, Ginger's older sister, which unlike her was tall and fibrated, with proportions 1016298, a serious and enviable face for every female and long hair up to her waist. Yes ma'am. Ginger said, making the military salute jokingly. Well. What do we do, Vegeta? Do we put this planet off and leave? Yam asked to the most powerful and authoritative person among them. They said something interesting. Something about Dragon Balls, Vegeta said, answering what he wanted. Yeah, sounds like they can grant any kind of wish, Nappa replied, who was attentive to all the retransmission. Alright, let's go there, Vegeta replied when he saw that he wasn't the only one who had heard such important information. We'll bring back Raditz back to life then. Yam asked his superior to find out what the real goal was, a very serious girl committed with her work. Get real, I no longer have a need for his services. We'd like eternal life and to remain ageless. How does that sound? Said Vegeta, who had already found one of the most obvious and desired applications for the Dragon Ball. If we wish for that, we can enjoy battle until the end of time. Yes, it's a great wish sir, said Yam, who understood Vegeta's intention at first. I get it. That's awesome, Nappa replied, who for some reason needed an explanation to understand the implications and motives of that wish. Oh, that's a better idea than I had. Okay, I sign up, Ginger shouted, amazed and delighted at the idea of not getting old. This smells like more work, Scallion replied pessimistically. Came house. After the trip in which Mutant Rashi and Krillin were very narrow in the back of the vehicle, the four arrived at the Kame house where Yumagame was waiting for them, and while Bulma studied and tried to adapt the tracker of Raditz, comparing it with the information that Broly had supplied. Obviously, the questions towards Broly began, which he replied with a beautiful story from his birth until he reached Earth. Story that caused Krillin, Mutant Rashi and Yumagame to disengage their jaw in disbelief. Even Bulma had the same reaction from time to time despite being focused on the trackers. And that's all, my friends. This is the fascinating story of how from the incubator I managed to make a spaceship, fool the whole world to believe that I was still in the incubator, I got stronger and escaped from that planet before those bastards could try to force me to become a pawn in their abominable criminal corporation. I arrived at this beautiful and in principle peaceful planet where I knew Bulma's sister, Corinne, Cammy, Mr. Popo. And hee hee. Maybe in a pretty funny way I'm the one who made the greatest useless agent of the Galactic Patrol couldn't kill Goku when he arrived on this planet, because he confused me with him, Broly said, explaining its origins, but not explaining many details that shouldn't be known for obvious reasons. He didn't want to look like a sociopath or not to give information about the gods and other concepts that are too advanced for now. This is too impressive. Are you sure you're not inventing all this, or you are exaggerating a lot of things, Krillin said, since he was unable to believe the story Broly had told about his exciting and unlikely early life. Invent? Exaggerate? I have softened the story a lot. I haven't even explained my struggle with Frost and his army, Beerus, Kampa, or the Order 66, Broly thought, who abandoned the common sense of a more or less common person years ago, so he thought that his story seemed credible. Did you build your first spacecraft with 3 years while staying in an incubator with your telekinesis without anyone noticing? Certainly, the universe is full of impressive people, Mutant Rashi said, that although he didn't know the exact complexity of building a spaceship, he knew how complicated it was to do any precision construction with telekinesis, and more doing it miles away. That's something that he didn't dare to dream about. The previous strongest and most versatile man on the planet felt defeated in every way. It doesn't have that much merit. Telekinesis is one of my innate abilities and I practically copied my spaceship from an existing one. Who is really amazing here is Bulma, who with 5 years built a high-power laser gun out of nowhere and knew how to fix a spaceship in a few seconds despite never having seen one. This was Ty's favorite anecdote, her super genius sister in action, Broly said, trying to appear humble and positively reinforce Bulma, making her feel important, although it was certainly impressive. AI-ish, my sister always exaggerates that history. Bulma said, flushed a little due to Broly's praise, also because everyone but Broly looked at her like she was a weirdo, and the nostalgia factor also contributed. Speaking of inventions and strange machines, shouldn't you help Bulma with that extraterrestrial device? Asked Yumagame, who saw that there was another person with brain in the group and could work together. I already offered my help, but she wanted to look at it for herself to adapt it better to Earth. Don't worry, it's not like she needs anyone's help to solve and improve Raditz tracker. She will finish before the envoy of Cammy for a martial arts camp arrives, Broly said to reassure Yumagame, praise Bulma, and disturb Krillin and Mutant Rashi. Martial arts camp? Both asked, quite puzzled. But before he can resolve that fleeting doubt. Ready, I have already solved it. Yes, it's just as you said. Although the functionality is still incredible, who made the final adjustments was a real fool. In the event that the target's power is too large for its processing capacity, the device overheats and explodes. There are no resistances or limiters outside this planet, or they are only stupids. Said Bulma, who couldn't understand how such an impressive technological jewel had such an elementary fault. Ha 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 ha, yes, it is quite pathetic, as if they had been designed by an 80s mangaka who didn't know much about computers. By the way, I have prepared some snacks, I hope you like them. I had a lot of strawberries at home, so I used them to make some desserts for everyone, said a bully, taking out with telekinesis several cakes and ice creams that contained or were made of strawberries from the kitchen, but not any kind of strawberries, it were strawberries from a genetically improved strawhibi from the Toriko world. And despite the strange impression of seeing dishes flying around the house, none of them could avoid praising the exquisite presentation and aroma of the cakes that Broly had placed before them. More than food, they looked like precious treasures carved by the same gods. Strawberries. They are my favorites. Bulma said with great enthusiasm, so much that she even forgot to show the results of her little research. For real. I didn't know. Eat everything you want, I can still do many more, in fact I have left a few in the fridge in case you want more later. Of course I knew, he, Broly said, taking out more cakes and ice cream from the kitchen. Have you cooked all this? Mutant Roshi asked ecstatically, despite living more than a century, is the first time he tasted something like this. And he also knows how to cook better than all the chefs are that my family has hired since I was born together. So, Bulma thought with hearts and tears in her eyes, hearts for the growing admiration in Broly. She is one of those who fall in love quickly, and tears because she couldn't believe that there were so good strawberries in the world, although technically they weren't of this world, or universe, or reality. Another mini point for me. I have also conquered her through her stomach with her favorite dish. In no time I could uninstall Tinder, Broly thought with a wicked and vicious inner smile when he saw the obvious signs that Bulma was beginning to feel attracted to him, especially for her eyes. By the way Bulma, what did you want to show us? Said Mutant Roshi, who had finished his portion and had cream all over his beard. And Bulma, who also had his mouth covered in cream, swallowed it, got up, put on the tracker. Hey, you. Grandpa Tull, stand up, she said indicating to Rashi to get up. Grandpa Tull? Said Mutant Rashi, who had never been referred to by that term. Bulma looked at Mutant Rashi, pressed a few buttons and some letters and numbers appeared. Let's see. 139 inch. 139. I feel too old. Said Mutant Rashi, who didn't understand what that numbers represented. That's the number that represents your strength, Bulma said, clarifying the tracker's operation. A number that represents strength? Wow. What an incredible device. It can really tell all of that. Mutant Rashi said, surprised by the tracker's functionality, and relieved not to be confused by a potential corpse. Be Bulma-san, what's mine? Said Krillin, who was curious to know what his strength in numbers was. Wow. It's 206 inch, Bulma said, surprised to see that Krillin had surpassed his master in strength. I really ended up surpassing Munten Rashi-sama then, didn't I? Said Krillin with excitement for having surpassed his teacher by nearly 100 points. Hey, are you sure it's not broken? Mutant Roshi complained, not wanting to accept reality. And before Bulma could make sure that the tracker worked perfectly and even better than before. Ha 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 ha. No, it is not damaged, it is measuring the energy power that your body gives off based on your internal, external energy and physical capacities. However, that doesn't give an exact number of your real combat strength, although a big difference between numbers can be almost insurmountable, in the same way that exists among boxing fighters in very different weight categories. The technique, experience, skills and strategy are extremely determined and that device is unable to measure them. And these are factors that are able to skip those power/weight differences. Imagine that someone had a super powerful arcane ability but had a very low number and go against someone who quadrupled his power with no arcane skill. It would be the same like a heavyweight boxer going against a rooster weight with a machine gun loaded with hundreds of bullets. Who do you think will win? Broly said, explaining how inaccurate are the fighting points the trackers showed to determine the fighting power. And after digesting those concepts and explanations that Broly had explained. I see, hee. I guess I got carried away, Krillin said, rubbing his bald head, ashamed of himself for having unilaterally declared himself to be stronger than his teacher. Yes, you have, but I'm glad you recognized it, my disciple who still has a lot to learn, said Mutant Roshi, that now felt better with himself, since few people could beat him in strange techniques and experience. But don't worry about that, soon someone will come to recruit you to increase those numbers. Broly said casually as he slowly ate a slice of his telekinetic made cake. And, when will that be? Asked Krillin, who wanted to increase his power as soon as possible, for the arrival of the Scions and, for competitiveness. And then Broly took a calendar and a clock and after consulting them carefully said, precisely in 3, 2, 1. Hey! Someone shouted from outside the house. Really? Has anyone really come? Said Krillin, who got up to see if an envoy of Kami's has come to recruit them. Hey, hello, Yajirobe, the envoy of Kami said. Envoy of the envoy. Broly was right. You are that guy from Karen-sama Tower, right? Armadillo? Krillin said, amazed but not too much that Broly's prophecy had been fulfilled. It's Yajirobe, you stupid idiot. Yajirobe shouted when he saw that they didn't remember his name. I came here because Karen told me to give you a mess. Yes, don't worry about that, I have already informed them about the current situation. I've also told you about Goku's situation, although Baba will come later to explain it better. Krillin will go find Ten, Yam and Chan train with you, Broly said, interrupting Yajirobe, who didn't mind the interruption, since he had to do less work in this way. Is Kami really going to train us? Yes. We will let you know as soon as possible, Krillin said, very excited about the idea of being trained by the same Earth God who trained his friend Goku. Ah. You must be Broly, the guy that everyone has warned me to get as far away as possible. Karen always mentions your name when he has nightmares. Anyway, I'm leaving, my work here is over. I don't know why they have made me come. Yajirobe said while riding in his car, partly happy for not having to work hard and on the other hand angry about the fact that they made him come here for nothing. Nightmares? Get away from him. Why? Everyone asked, since they didn't understand the reason for those words. And at that time Bulma used the tracker to measure Yajirobe's combat power, which was leaving right now, 218 points. Wow. He's stronger than Krillin. What? Really? Shouted Mutant Rashi and Krillin, who felt humiliated by having smaller numbers than him. It was as if they have a smaller penis, although they had been told that the technique, experience, resistance and knowing how to use it is more important than the size. But Bulma didn't stop here, there was something else she wanted to check with her device. From the moment I saw him. I've been curious, how strong are you, Broly? Bulma said, focusing on Broly using the tracker to measure his strength, but... Bling bling bling, bling bling, bling. What is happening? Has it gone crazy? Bulma said angrily with her own creation, which was unable to give an exact number. Bling 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 bling. Crew. Crew, crew. Immeasurable value. What? No, it can't be true, it's impossible, Bulma shouted with great astonishment, disbelief and even fear seeing the result. And Mutant Rashi and Krillin obviously were also alerted by that exaggerated reaction that was probably due to the power level of Broly presented in the tracker. What happens, Bulma? And Bulma, equally astonished and incredulous, but beginning to accept the reality as absurd as it seemed, answered with trembling voice. The result is immeasurable, but it cannot be possible. With the improvements that I have applied to this tracker, I should be able to measure up to a combat power of 300 million. If it can't measure Broly's power, that means that his power is 300.000.000, a number that they didn't know exactly what it means, since it was the first time they heard of a numerically standardized power level. However, they understood what they could mean. If Mutant Rashi was able to destroy the moon with a fighting power that didn't even reach 200, what could Broly do, which was millions of times stronger than him? And Mutant Rashi and Krillin understood the implication of Bulma's words perfectly. More than 300.00. Broly-san. Do you know approximately what's the power level of the 5 Scions? Asked Mutant Rashi, who was overwhelmed by the difference in power like never before today. It was no longer about knowing how strong Broly was compared to them, they needed to know how strong the Scions were in comparison. If the difference in power was a few hundred or a few thousand, it might still be possible to prepare for the fight. It would be terrifying anyway, but there would still be some hope. But what would happen if the difference was in millions like Broly? Yes, of course. Given that Raditz had a combat power of 1500. The weakest of all has a power of 1492, after that there is a tomboy loli of 2436, followed by a bald man of 4000, a bossy with no sense of humor of 10,800 and the dwarf former prince of the Scions with 18,000. They will arrive in 339 days, Brawlis said looking up at the sky and answering with excessive precision. Quite alarming information for our Z warriors since according to Broly all the enemies they would face were at least more than 10 times stronger than them, and the strongest of the enemies was more than 10 times stronger than the one that almost killed them all. And obviously this information disrupted our impressionable Z warriors, although in view of how powerful Broly is, in part they were relieved. Don't tell me that you are seeing and measuring them in real time. It's a joke, right? Krillin said as he imagined what was really happening. Broly was being able to see them in real time thanks to his evolved Jugon, the space covered by his formless realm, and a lot of Najimi skills. One moment, you want to tell us then that your strength is greater than 300 million and that its combined strength is 36.628? Asked Bulma, which quickly come up with an easy and logical conclusion. That's right. 366.280 if they transform into a Ozaru, into a giant monkey to be more concrete, Broly answered, providing even more information, quite disturbing information one more time. What? 10 times? Oh, okay. So, could you just beat them all when they arrive since you are millions of times stronger than them? Asked Bulma, who finished his logical reasoning with the most practical solution for everyone. It's true. With such a difference you could destroy them with just one finger, said Krillin seconded by Mutant Rashi with great joy, the joy of someone who knows that his life and his planet will be safe the next year. However, Broly said something that didn't please everyone, well, anybody. With one finger. I just have to think about it and that's all. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid it won't be possible. I don't want them to kill you, nor do they kill all humans, but on the other hand I would feel uncomfortable killing someone of my race, especially since we are so few, and because I don't like killing people. So when Cammy asked me for help for this, I established from the beginning that it would only be your support, helping you with information, training, health treatment, advice and other things. But I will not fight. I'm sorry, but you will have to manage them. It is not negotiable. Broly replied, apologizing for the setback, but concisely expressing that he couldn't do anything, that these were the rules. And the reactions immediately followed. No. It can't be true, you're kidding, right? Krillin said, overwhelmed by the words of Broly and almost losing the illusion to live, as if he were a person who had won the lottery, but had lost the ticket at the next second. One moment, Broly. How can you say something like that? Do you not care that millions of people could die? Don't you mind that we could die? Don't you remember that your friend Tights and her whole family, in which I am included, will also die in the case of not defeating these homicidal aliens? Don't you care about us? Bulma shouted very vigorously, in a very bad mood, so much that she had forgotten about the crush she had been having for Broly. She even came to despise him for a few moments. Ha ha ha. Don't get upset, Bulma, I'm talking to you telepathically. Don't shout, I don't want anyone to know what I want to tell you, Broly said, telepathically speaking to Bulma. Are you talking to me with the mind? Awesome, which calmed down for a moment because of the big surprise and because Bulma understood that Broly wanted to tell her something about what he had said seconds ago. Tell her something that must be a secret for some reason. Of course I will help you fight the Scions if they manage to overcome your friends, and of course I will protect you and the inhabitants of this planet. But if I say that I will take care of everything, your friends will not have enough motivation to train and become stronger. And as you could see, this universe is not peaceful at all. Sooner or later other bad and powerful guys will come to look for problems and they have to be prepared. They can't depend on me for everything, and Goku won't always be able to save the situation by himself. So I would ask you not to tell them anything. I know that this is a difficult and unpleasant request to deceive your friends, but it is for their own and your good, Broly said telepathically once again. And upon hearing the complete telepathic explanation, Bulma blushed even more, partly because of her exaggerated reaction and misunderstanding once more. And the other reason was because she felt more infatuated by Broly when she saw his responsible and protective side at so many levels. There's a thin line between love and hate. Sorry Broly-san. I think I got carried away, Ah, Bulma thought, not knowing what to say or what face put to hide her shame. Another mini point for Broly. Broly thought outside the telepathic conversation. Don't mind it, I should apologize. I should have warned you before saying that, but we should prepare for another guest from what I see, Broly said telepathically once more. Another guest? Who? Bulma asked in her mind. What the hell is going on? Asked Krillin and Mutant Rashi, who were detecting a rather abnormal behavior between Bulma and Broly, but especially in Bulma. Form realm. Once again in the immense white dimension. Broly sat in front of Gohan, who devoured a succulent feast in the same way his father would, or rather like his father if he hadn't eaten something decent for months. Well Gohan, you have passed the first test, you have survived for 9 months in my garden. I guess we can now move on to phase 2 of your training, Broly said, materializing a blackboard next to him. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.